All right, so we're diving into the world of money management in your 20s. We've got this podcast all about avoiding those classic money mistakes. And let me tell you, it's packed with good stuff.
Yeah, and I'm glad we're talking about this because it's not about being perfect with your finances, right? It's more like here's a guide to help you navigate those tricky money situations that pop up in your 20s.
Exactly. And they jump right into it with this idea that might seem basic, but is so crucial. They're like, look, budgeting, it's not optional.
Yeah, they're like, if you're not budgeting, it's like, building a house without a blueprint. You might end up with something, but
It's not going to be pretty.
exactly. And they don't just tell you to budget, they explain why it matters, especially when you're in your 20s. Like, it's about more than just not overspending, which, yeah, that's important, but.
It's about building those good habits early on.
Right. It's about understanding your relationship with money. And you know what? They even mentioned a study in this episode that found that people who budget regularly actually end up saving significantly more for retirement. Which, let's be real, retirement can feel like a lifetime away when you're in your 20s.
Seriously, a lifetime. But that's exactly why starting those habits early is so key.
Totally. And they're not just giving you the theory here, they actually recommend some tools to make budgeting less intimidating, like budgeting
Oh,
apps.
thank goodness for budgeting apps, right? Because those spreadsheets, they can be a bit much sometimes.
For real. They're big fans of this app called You Need a Budget, YNAB. Have you heard of it?
Yeah, I've heard good things.
So they specifically call out their method of giving every dollar a job, which I love. It's such a game changer because you know exactly where your money's going. No more of those like, where did all my money go moments at the end of the month.
It's like giving your money a purpose. I
Yeah.
love that. Okay, so moving on, they tackle this sneaky thing called lifestyle inflation. You know that feeling when, like, no matter how much money you make, you always seem to be spending just as much, if not more.
Oh, tell me about it. I feel like I'm constantly battling lifestyle inflation. Remember when we were talking about getting that new phone?
Oh, yeah.
Total lifestyle inflation trap. But what I appreciate is they explain why this happens, It's not just about being irresponsible, it's actually a very human thing.
Hmm.
As our income increases, our expectations and what we perceive as needs, they kind of shift.
Yeah, our wants start to feel like needs. It's a slippery slope.
Exactly. And so they suggest this really interesting exercise. Think about something that you really, really wanted to buy when you were on a tighter budget. Like, does it still seem as essential now?
Ooh, that's a good one. Trying to think. Oh, you know what? I remember when I really, really wanted insert relatable item. And now, honestly, I can't even remember why I wanted it so badly.
It's so true. Our priorities change, our perspectives change. And what they're encouraging us to do is to kind of step back and consider, okay, what would my future self prioritize? It's that long-term thinking, right? Realizing that sometimes the most financially sound decision is not always the most instantly gratifying one.
Totally. And I love that they frame it that way, thinking about what your future self would want.
Speaking of the future, they get into a topic that can feel a little intimidating, but they make a really compelling case for why it matters. Investing early and often.
Yes. And they dispel this myth that investing is only for, like, the super rich. They actually share a story about these two people.
Uh,
One starts investing a small amount in their 20s, the other person waits until their 30s. And even with just that 5-year difference, the amount of money they end up with, it's drastically different. It really highlights that opportunity cost of delaying.
It's like you can't go back in time, but you can start today.
Exactly. They break down this idea of compound interest. You know that thing that happens when your money starts making more money? It's like magic, but with money.
Right. And they describe it like a snowball rolling downhill, picking up more and more snow as it goes, right?
Yeah.
So the earlier you start that snowball rolling, the bigger that snowball of wealth can become.
Such a great analogy.
Mm.
And they even offer some specific resources like apps like Robinhood and Acorns. And they talk about how these apps make it so easy to start investing, even if you only have like a few dollars to spare. I love that they provide those tools. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about budgeting, we've talked about lifestyle inflation, we've talked about investing.
So we were talking about investing and that snowball effect with compound interest, right? Super important stuff. And from there, this episode dives into another topic that, it can feel a little bit heavy, but they handle it in a really empowering way. Debt.
Yeah, they don't sugarcoat it. They get real about those high-interest credit card balances and how quickly those can spiral.
Yeah, it's like that debt growing faster than you can shrink it. It's a scary thought. But then they offer this really helpful reframe.
Okay, I'm all about reframing. Tell me more.
So they talk about the psychology of minimum payments, right? It's so easy to fall into that trap of thinking, okay, well, I can afford this minimum payment, so it's fine, right? Like it's just a small amount. But then they break down how much you actually end up paying in interest.
Oh, it's eye-opening for sure. I've definitely been there. Like, oh, it's just a small amount each month. What could go wrong?
Exactly. And they actually challenge you to do this little exercise. Calculate how much you're currently paying in interest on your debt, and then ask yourself, what could I do with that money if I didn't have this debt?
That is motivating. I like that. Like, instead of focusing on the negative, like the debt itself, you're thinking about what you could achieve.
Exactly. It's about taking back that control and then using it to fuel your debt payoff journey.
It's like, you've got this.
Yeah.
And speaking of got this, the podcast wraps up with a topic that's all about taking charge. Goal setting.
And I love how they tie this back to everything we've been talking about, budgeting, investing, tackling debt. Like, none of it really matters if you don't have a clear idea of what you're actually working towards, right? What's your why?
It's like having a destination in mind, right? Like if you're going on a road trip, if you don't know where you're going, you're just driving around aimlessly. They actually share this quote that really resonated with me. A goal without a plan is just a wish.
Ooh, I like that.
Right. And so they give you the why, but then they also break it down, like the how to set those effective financial goals.
And they keep it real. They acknowledge that it can be super overwhelming, especially if you're thinking about those really big, huge goals. So they offer this like really simple but powerful framework.
Okay, tell me more about that.
So first they say, get clear on your why. Like, what's the driving force behind your financial goals? What do you actually want your life to look like? And then they're like, okay, now break those big goals down into smaller, more manageable steps. It feels so much less daunting that way.
Oh, so true. It's all about those small wins. They really emphasize that. Like, even small goals matter. It's about building momentum and proving to yourself that you can do it. Like, I remember when I wanted to insert a relatable goal you achieved, that was not easy. But setting those smaller milestones along the way, it made such a difference.
Oh, for sure. Like each milestone, no matter how big or small, it reinforces that you're on the right track. And it keeps you motivated.
It's those little wins that add up.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered so much ground here. We talked about budgeting, lifestyle inflation, investing, debt, goal setting. What stands out to you as the most impactful takeaway?
What I found really interesting is how they took all these like potentially complex financial topics and they made them feel really accessible. They weren't talking down to you. It felt like they were having a conversation, not just any conversation, a conversation that could like genuinely change someone's life.
Okay, so we are back and ready to wrap up this deep dive into mastering your money, especially in your 20s. And I'm telling you, this episode has been like a financial boot camp in all the best ways.
Seriously, we've talked about so much, haven't we? I mean, from the nuts and bolts of budgeting all the way to like, the bigger picture of setting goals and just like having a healthy relationship with money.
It's like they handed us this roadmap, right?
Right.
And honestly, it's never too late to start using it. It doesn't matter if you're just like, at the very beginning of your financial journey or if you're feeling a little bit lost. I think the key takeaway is just to focus on what you can control, like right now.
I love that. It's about empowerment, not judgment, right? And you know what really struck me? They spend a surprising amount of time talking about the emotional side of money, which I thought was interesting. Because it's not just about crunching numbers, right? It's about understanding like, okay, what's my relationship with money? How is that affecting the decisions that I'm making? You're so right, because it's easy to overlook that aspect, but it plays a huge role. And they talk about how our emotions can sometimes, lead us astray, like those impulse purchases or lifestyle creep. But they also talk about how empowering it can be to like really take control of your finances.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people think of personal finance as being restrictive, right? But this podcast, they totally flip that on its head. They make it about freedom. Like the freedom that comes with making conscious choices, the freedom to pursue your dreams, the freedom from financial stress.
That's such a good point. It's not about deprivation, it's about alignment. It's about aligning your spending with your values and your goals. And speaking of goals, remember that question they asked about, what would our future selves be most proud of us doing financially today? Like that really stuck with me. I know. It's so powerful because it makes you zoom out, right? You're not caught up in those day-to-day things. You're thinking about the bigger picture. Like, what kind of financial foundation are you building for yourself, maybe even for future generations? It's about legacy.
It really is. It's about recognizing that, the choices we make today, even the small ones, can have such a huge impact down the line.
Yeah.
It's like, imagine yourself 10 years from now, right? What would it take for your future self to look back and be like, yes, I am so proud of the decisions I made back then?
What a cool thought, right? And you know what else I appreciate about this episode? They didn't just like throw all this information at us and then just leave us to figure it out, right? They really emphasized asking for help, which I thought was important. They were like, it's not weak to ask for help, it's actually a sign of strength.
Right.
So, whether that's talking to a financial advisor or a friend, a mentor, even just doing your own research, knowledge is power.
It really is. The more you understand, the more confident you'll feel making those decisions that align with your goals and your values.
Right.
And they literally say, investing in your financial literacy is one of the best investments you can make.
So true. So as we wrap up, here's the message I hope you take away. You've got this. Managing your money might feel overwhelming at times, but it really doesn't have to be. Just start small, be consistent, and don't be afraid to ask for help along the way.
I love that. And remember, it's a journey, not a race, right? You don't have to become a financial expert overnight. Every step you take, no matter how small, it's bringing you closer to where you want to be. So keep learning, keep growing, and keep celebrating those wins, no matter how big or small.
Yes. And with that, until next time, keep exploring, keep diving deep, and we'll catch you on the flip side.